As the saying goes, there are only two certainties in life: death and taxes. But what if your death ends up going down in history as amongst the most interesting, the most confusing, or even surrounded by the most conspiracy theories? For example, there's an Irishman living in New York City in the 1920s and 30s. It's the Depression era, and a lot of people are out of work, homeless, and finding whatever way they can to make it through the day. For Mike Malloy, it was drinking. He would go to the local speakeasy as often as he could to drown out the woes life had handed him. To the owner of the bar, though, Mike Malloy started to look less and less like a patron and more like some very easy cash. The plan the bar owner and his group of accomplices would hatch would lead to them attempting to murder Mike Malloy once, twice, 3 times, and then more. Each time, the method of delivering that death became more unhinged and elaborate. The problem for them was that Mike, who would go on to be nicknamed Iron Mike or Mike the Durable, through no effort of his own, simply could not or would not die. I'm Claire Murphy, and this is True Crime Conversations, a podcast exploring the world's most notorious crimes by speaking to the people who know the most about them. Today, we're chatting to the author of the book History's Strangest Deaths, Riley Knight. He's lined up 50 tales spanning thousands of years of history of people who've taken the certainty of death and made it a truly spectacular event. From Australia's disappearing Prime Minister to a Duke whose toilet run ended up rather more spiky than he expected, Riley joins us now to talk us through some of his favourite ways to die. Riley, thank you so much for joining us on True Crime Conversations. We're going to have a weirdly fun chat about death.
Yes, well, thanks very much for having me, mate, and very, very pleased to be here plugging the old book, History's Strangest Deaths, available now in all good bookstores and some bad ones as well.
I would like to kick off today's conversation because you have written a book about strange deaths, and some of them are natural causes, some of them very mysterious, but seeing as we are True Crime Conversations, we want to start off with things that were actual crimes. So I would like to begin by talking about Iron Mike Malloy.
Oh,
now,
mate, yes.
as
a
a
well-chosen one if we're talking about crime here for sure, sorry.
Well, many crimes committed against this one man, but
indeed.
as a descendant myself of Irish Malloys, I know they're made of pretty sturdy stuff, but can you give us just a little idea of who Mike Malloy was and where he was in the world at this time?
So Mike Malloy was, as you say, was an Irish fella, and he immigrated to the United States, as many Irish people did, towards the end of around the turn of the 20th century, sort of end of the 19th, early 20th century. Obviously, a huge amount of immigration over to the Big Apple. And he picked up work over there doing this and that. He was a firefighter at one stage, worked in a couple of other jobs. But unfortunately, in his later years, he fell on hard times and ended up taking to the bottle. Ended up homeless as well. So the poor bloke was having a very rough go of things. But he did like a drink, and this tended to be how he would, drown his sorrows. And there was a group of rather unscrupulous blokes who saw an opportunity in that, right? There was this fellow, Tony Marino, who owned a bar in New York City. And he had actually successfully pulled off a life insurance scam previously, right? I'm not sure if this woman was a patron of his at the bar or what have you, but he essentially tricked her into signing life insurance documents with him as the beneficiary, murdered her, right, by freezing her to death, got her so drunk, left her in her bedroom with the window open on a freezing night. She froze. The death was deemed natural, right, and therefore her life insurance paid out, and Marino ended up benefiting from this. So obviously he's just seeing dollar signs when he looks at this bloke, Mike Malloy, thinking, well, I can pull a similar scheme with this fellow. But he did take obviously, lightning doesn't strike. Well, it does strike twice, but in a figurative sense, lightning doesn't strike twice. He didn't want to pull exactly the same scam and freeze Iron Mike to death. So he took.
It would look a little bit suspicious if that happened. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So he took a slightly different approach, or many different approaches, in trying to knock this bloke off. In fact.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning because there were many attempts on Iron Mike Malloy's life. How did they initially deem the correct way to knock him off without raising too much suspicion?
Well, they thought, given that this bloke did love a drink, right? They thought that that would be the sort of the most natural way for, it wouldn't raise many eyebrows if he was found to have sort of drank himself to death, right? And
Like alcohol poisoning.
exactly, essentially, yeah, just dying because of overconsumption of alcohol. So that was Plan A, right? So Marino invites him into the bar and says, "Mate, drinks are on the house. Don't even worry about it." The bartender, whose name was Joseph Murphy, just plied him with alcohol and then put in front of him what he said was a political petition, right? Will you sign this for me, mate? Thanks very much. In fact, it was, as you've probably guessed, a life insurance policy. It was a life insurance policy document that Marino and his other accomplices, they were later called the Murder Trust, the sensational appellation that was given to them by the tabloids. They fronted the money for the life insurance premium, right? And they continued to just give as much booze to this bloke, Mike Malloy, as he could possibly chuck down his hole. And this guy just drank and drank and drank, like day in and day. He'd come in, he would drink himself insensible, pass out, and then get up, stagger outside, and come back the next day and do it again and again. And this guy was seemingly indestructible. An iron liver, right? This alcohol didn't. It's not that it didn't touch him, because again he was passing out and staggering out of the bar, absolutely, pissed as a chook. But it didn't kill him. And after quite some time, and obviously at some cost as well. I mean,
he's giving him free drinks, right?
Free drinks. The bars are well into the red here. And so it's a big problem. And they say, okay, well, we're gonna have to up the ante here, because clearly, right, just plying him with booze, he's not going to die of liver failure. Don't know what's going on with this bloke, but he's indestructible.
So stage 2, what do they start to deploy?
So they start to adulterate the drinks a little bit. Right. They start to add a couple of extra ingredients to turn his alcohol into what should have been, in their minds at least, lethal cocktails. Now, they made a slight error in how they started this campaign, because the first thing that they added to his drinks was engine coolant. Right, you'll often see in the. I found this very interesting, actually, when I was researching this story. A lot of the literature on it is American, right? Obviously, this happened in America, so there's a lot of American writing about it. And so they talked about how they added antifreeze to the drinks. And I was trying to find stuff about antifreeze, and I was like, what? It turns out that antifreeze and engine coolant are the same thing. You can put one liquid in a car engine that both prevents it from overheating and prevents it from freezing. There's just one liquid that does that. Like, that's
some wild chemical compound going on there.
Right? Well, there's another very interesting chemical attribute of antifreeze or engine coolant. It's poisonous. Obviously, it'll kill. Like, don't drink it; it'll kill you. It goes in the car. It doesn't go in your gob. Except you're not going to believe this. An antidote to engine coolant, antifreeze poisoning, is alcohol. Alcohol counteracts the effects of ethanol poisoning, right? Apparently, which is one of the main ingredients in this substance. And so, what they were doing essentially is mixing poison into a glass of antidote, which they then served to this bloke. And then they're scratching their heads. Why is this killing him?
So Iron Mike is just still happily drinking away, none the wiser.
Yeah, it didn't even seem to be. I don't know. I mean, maybe his taste buds were so shot that he didn't notice the adulteration whatsoever. Yeah. But look, this bloke again had an incredible constitution, because after the engine coolant failed, they started to put turpentine in his drinks, equine liniment, right, a heat rub for horses. They put rat poison in his drinks. They put wood alcohol. Now, wood alcohol will kill you so fast, right? If you drink wood alcohol, you will go blind and then you will die. But again, it's filled with ethanol, and alcohol is an antidote to this. But for all the other
nearly
stuff,
everything they're giving him is counteracted by the alcohol.
Well, I don't know why he didn't die with the rat poisoning, right? Like, I understand he's not a rat; it's not designed to kill him. But rat poisoning is pretty lethal. I haven't tried it myself. I haven't conclusively discovered this, but I'll read the label, the warning, and I'll take their word for it. But no, all of this stuff that was put into his drinks, it still just didn't kill him.
So they must be getting desperate by this stage, because as we mentioned before, they're now paying premiums
Mm,
to the insurance company.
mm.
He's drinking the bar dry every night. So they are losing money on this
Oh
guy
yeah,
now.
yes, yeah.
So
And
they get desperate. Like, what's their next step?
well, as I say in the book, it seems to be that this is the point that they got to the no bad ideas stage of the
Right. Okay.
conspiracy, because one of the guys in the murder trust, he claimed to have seen someone die after eating like 30 oysters and washing them down with whiskey. And he was like,
Okay.
well, I don't know, man. Maybe like oysters and whiskey is lethal. Who knows? So they tried that. Go and buy a bunch of oysters, right? And fed him them and gave him whiskey. That didn't work. They made him a sandwich with rotten sardines, right? Sprinkled with a little bit of rat poison, just for taste.
Good measure. Yep.
And then also, like a Looney Tunes cartoon, put some carpet tacks in the sandwich as well. And Iron Mike just ate it and didn't say like the just didn't it just didn't touch him. Like I guess he was that drunk or that hungry
What
that
is this guy made of?
I look, he was very deserving of the nickname that he got later on, Iron Mike, right? Like this guy
Mhm.
was seemingly untouchable. Anyway, none of this has worked, right? The sardines, the rat poison, the carpet tacks, the horse liniment, the turpentine, the wood alcohol, like none of this has worked. And so at this point, Marino goes, right, okay, look, I'll tell you what does work, right? Bugger it, bloody getting suspicious with the authorities. I'll tell you what does work, freezing him to death. We've done that before, we'll do it again.
Yep.
So the next stage, right, was they got him drunk again. He passed out. They soaked him with water. This is in the middle of winter in New York, so it's freezing cold. Snow's coming down.
Mhm.
Soaked him with water, dumped him in a park, right, and left him to essentially die. And the life insurance, they looked a little closely. They'd see that Marino was once again the beneficiary of a life insurance where this guy had frozen to death just like the other lady beforehand. But this guy, like at this point, they just need him dead. So they'll do whatever they can. Except they had some rather bad fortune because they dumped him in a park where he was found by passing police officers who obviously, were concerned for this bloke or perhaps, not happy with his vagrancy. And so they took him back to the station where he warmed up, survived, and then headed back to the bar the next day to keep
So
chucking the drinks down.
what is this, like attempt 10 now? Like how many attempts of his life has he actually survived by this point?
They have run out of space on the whiteboard at this stage, right?
Right.
They're like plan E, plan F, plan G, plan H, like
Yeah.
they're running out of letters.
Yeah.
At this stage, they bring a fifth member into the murder trust, a cab driver, right, who had the sufficient moral flexibility to come on board with their plan, and they took a very straightforward approach. They still needed, obviously they couldn't just shoot him or stab him, right, because then suspicious circumstances they're not going to get life insurance payouts. But what if he was just like accidentally hit by a car? This is what
He's
they
a
tried.
drunk, right?
Yeah,
They
he's
might be
drunk.
able to
He's stumbling
get away with
home.
that.
You're right. So what they did is essentially staged they staged a hit and run, but they, again, were very, very determined to make sure this guy was dead. So after taking him out into the street, getting the guy with the taxi to run over him, he then backed over him as well, which is not what a lot of hit and run drivers. I don't know.
No.
Anyway, they really did their best to make sure that he was dead. But surprise, surprise, he survived. He was taken to hospital, and he lived to fight another day. The blokes in the murder trust, after having taken him outside, run over him with a taxi twice, they're looking in the papers, right? Trying to find the death notice, trying to find the obituary. Oh, sadly, Mike Malloy didn't come. And so they don't know what to do. They don't know where he's got. They don't know that he survived. They don't know that he's in the hospital. It is weeks later, right, that Malloy walks back into the bar, cheerful as anything. How about a drink, boys? Right? Because he has this offer of, they've been playing with him with free booze for weeks now, right? Why wouldn't he go straight back there and have a drink after getting discharged from hospital?
So he has no inkling that we know of at this stage that these men are the ones who are trying to knock him off?
Well, look, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, or maybe the siren call of an open bar was just too much for him to ignore. But he did continue to go back to this bar, and he did continue to be served these drinks as these blokes were trying to figure out a way to kill him. But in the end, they finally they did something that put the whole thing beyond any form of doubt, right? It is unfortunate because obviously it's been a terrific tale so far, but we all know that it was going to come to a tragic end. And sadly, Mike Malloy, he did die. when they, again, got him so drunk that he passed out. They took him upstairs. They took a hose from like a gas faucet, taped it into his mouth, and essentially made him breathe in gas while passed out until unfortunately he did die. And he was there in front of it, like they were sure of it this time, right?
Like confirmed.
They watched him die, right? This time it's okay, he's dead. And then what they then had to do was pay off a shonky doctor to sign off on a dodgy death certificate saying that he had died of pneumonia. And then, right, they went to the life insurance company with this death certificate and they received the payout. At the end of all of this, the murder trust did get their payday because they accepted the doctor's note. They said, okay, this guy's died of pneumonia. Fair enough. Nothing suspicious about that, Being very quick, like, just don't, let's not, we don't need to get to a coroner or anything like that. That's fine. No. But it's interesting that you say before, why wasn't this guy suspicious, right? Now, look, he's an older fella. He's had a fair few drinks in him over his time. Maybe he's not in the sort of the clearest frame of mind to be thinking critically about what's going on to him. But I tell you who were the cops. The police at this stage, right, they've heard rumors about this guy who, because obviously the story is spreading about this guy who's just drinking like a fish every night. Oh, he's got hit by a car. He got picked up by the cops for being left in the, he's left out in freezing.
So they're starting to go, hang on a minute.
They're starting to
This is starting to look sus. Yeah.
Right. And when it was announced that this guy had died, right, when the I don't know, the paperwork for the death certificate, whatever else, was officially lodged, the cops like, right, okay, we need to look into this. So before he can be, cremated and before his corpse can be disposed of once and for all, the police step in. They order a full, coronial investigation into this guy's death. And of course, the coroner immediately finds that he didn't die of pneumonia. He died because he had essentially been gassed. So the ill-gotten gains of the murder trust was not long enjoyed. It wasn't long before these guys would... I mean, look, very clear trail of evidence, right? Okay. Who could have possibly done this to him? Was it the guy who owned the bar where he was drinking, who was also a beneficiary of his life? Well, impossible to determine. Let's go to lunch, So very, very quick and clear path to the perpetrators here, the murder trust. They were all rounded up and they were sent to New York's infamous Sing Sing prison. And eventually they had a scheduled appointment with the electric chair. So that was the end of them. They did receive, I suppose, their just desserts for their attempts to kill this fella. But it's incredible to think that he survived. It's a good thing he wasn't put in the electric chair because he would have knocked out the power grid in New York City if they'd tried to blast him.
So that's the legacy he leaves behind as Iron Mike then, right? The man who was essentially indestructible. So I guess he's become a bit of a legend for that.
Yeah, and obviously at the time when the story broke, there was a huge amount of coverage in the papers. It was a sensational story, right? The newspapers had an absolute field day with this because it had everything that people, there's murder and intrigue, and there were the plots and schemes and money and all that sort of stuff on the line. So people loved this story, and there was a lot of stuff that was written about it both at the time and in the years since, right? But you can't, I found it really interesting while researching the story to go back and read all of those newspaper reports because, you watch old newsreels and, the people are talking like this and, news today. And you sort of you can hear that voice in the way that the, terrible, shocking news today from New York City when I'm Mike Malloy. It was like, there's a real, we have sensationalist journalism today, right? But man, 100 years ago, they really know it. They knew what they were doing with sensational media. They really did.
They loved a bit of drama. Okay, let's move on and bring it a little bit closer to home because there is a death here in Australia which, whilst I think legally it's considered accidental, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists who believe it's actually a crime. So, of course, we are talking about the death of Prime Minister Harold Holt. Can you, before we get into what happened to him, just give us an idea, because obviously he's before many of our times. What kind of Prime Minister was he? What legacy did he leave politically behind him?
So Prime Minister Harold Holt came in at a time where the Australian Liberal Party, which confusingly for any international listeners is our Conservative Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party under Robert Menzies, right, our longest serving PM, had been in power for a very, very long time, right? And in this post-war period, the Australian Liberal Party really established itself as, this sort of centre-right political bastion, which obviously it still is today. But Holt, while a member of the Liberal Party, was a little more progressive in his outlook, right? And he sort of dragged Australia kicking and screaming into the 20th century, which was, obviously high time for such a thing, given it was the 1960s. But he actually did a lot of good work domestically in unpicking some of Australia's more backwards political institutions, right? He did important work in unpicking the White Australia policy, which would later on go to be properly abolished in the 1970s. And generally speaking, again, while still a member of the Liberal Party, had a political legacy that does reflect on him pretty well by today's standards, although not when it comes to his foreign policy, which was an absolute disaster because he was involved with US President Lyndon B. Johnson's campaigns in Vietnam. There was controversy about conscription. So something of a mixed legacy, although I think, the work that he did in tackling some of the systemic and institutionalized racism in this country throughout the 60s obviously reflects very, very well on him, even if his international policy or foreign policy record isn't necessarily the best. So an interesting and sometimes divisive figure in Australian history, but also so much of his political legacy is completely overshadowed by his not even his death, his disappearance, of course, which
we don't ever have it confirmed because nobody has ever been found.
That's it. We don't actually know for sure. Well, we can make a good guess, but again, there are plenty of people out there who have more interesting, I guess you could say, theories about what this guy's fate may have actually been.
Well, this is interesting because he has become the butt of a lot of jokes, and one monumental one, which we'll discuss later. But I often see on social media feeds now, Americans, when they discover this story, are like, excuse me, Australia, please explain how you lost a whole prime minister.
Yeah,
please explain.
We misplaced him. Yeah, he sort of fell between the couch cushions of history and we never saw him again. So,
well, let's talk about what actually happened the day he disappeared.
Yes, right. So Harold Holt, even as an older fella, right, was a very keen swimmer. Loved to swim. He would often go out in the surf, and in southern Victoria, right on the coast of southern Victoria, he had a number of spots that he loved to go, and little favorite haunts that he'd go and swim in the surf and do a bit of spear fishing, that sort of thing. Well, there's a pretty famous photo of him, I think, holding a spear gun. Right, he's got the flippers on and everything. So he was very much into that sort of thing. So the point I'm trying to make here: very strong swimmer, very comfortable in the water. Anyway, one day he's down at Cheviot Beach on the Victorian coastline, and it's a very rough day out in the surf. He's down there with some mates. And he decides that he wants to go in for a dip. Right now, this isn't surprising. Again, we know that he loves to swim. The others, they all look at the conditions. They're like, "Oh, I don't know about this, Harold, mate. Don't know. It doesn't look like the day for it." One of his other friends decides to come into the water with him. Right, but again, rough surf, poor conditions. It is a little bit dangerous. Holt, however, his famous quote was, "I know this beach like the back of my hand."
Mm-hmm.
However, he gets in the water with this other fella. This other fella very quickly realizes, okay, I'm not up to this task. He comes out of the surf. But Holt remained in the water and was caught by a rip, right? Now, Australians listening will know how deadly rips can be. They are one of the leading causes of accidental death in the water. If you're ever caught in a rip, so what happens is a rip is a sort of very strong outward current that will pull you away from the beach. And it's terrifying being caught in one, and your first instinct is, I need to swim back to shore, right? But if you do that, you're swimming against the current. What you need to do is actually swim parallel to the beach itself. You need to swim out of the rip to the left or to the right, and then you can, let the waves carry you back in. But it's terrifying to be caught in a rip. And
we would presume that being the very strong swimmer and knowledgeable ocean man that he was, that Harold Holt would probably have known that information.
And this is the most confusing thing, is because if he had been caught when he was caught in this rip, given the experience he had in choppy and rough waters like this, he would have known what to do, right? He would have known how to safely exit the rip. But he didn't. And he was dragged out to sea, and he was never seen again. Now, in the days that followed, in the weeks that followed, there were huge efforts put on, of course, to find. I mean, he's our prime minister, right? Second to the Australian Test cricket captain, right? He is the most important bloke in the country. So there's a huge rescue effort to try to find him. There's choppers going up in the water, in the air above the water. There are divers going into these awful conditions, right? They some of the bravest people you can imagine going in to try to search for Harold Holt in these terrible choppy waters. But days and days passed, and no sign whatsoever. Not a scrap of evidence was found as to what happened to Harold Holt. He was dragged out into the sea, and as I say, was never seen again. And we have never conclusively determined what actually happened to him. Obviously, there's sort of, the base assumption is that he sadly just drowned. But as you've already mentioned, there are a couple of interesting conspiracy theories that have emerged over the years.
Well, let's explore those because, you're right, we would naturally presume that he's been swept out to sea and the ocean is a very big body of water and things do go missing, never to be seen again. The fact that nothing has ever washed ashore anywhere ever again is strange, but not unheard of.
No, certainly, right? You can, corpses, whatever else, detritus in the sea can just get lost in the eddies of the ocean and, and just, I don't know, eaten by fish, sink to the bottom of the, whatever. It's not a guarantee that you're going to have a body returned to shore, yeah.
Exactly. However, there are some people who think, and you mentioned that there was some controversy within his prime ministerialship about his involvement or bringing Australia into the Vietnam War. How does that tie into what happened that day? What's the conspiracy theory about what happened to him?
Well, certainly there are a great many, right? There are all the usual ones. There's aliens, there's lizard people, all that sort of stuff. But some of the ones that are perhaps a little more, well, at least there's a thread of logic running through them. We know that the CIA was interventionalist sometimes in foreign affairs when they felt the need to be. And some people have sort of, they've got the red string out and they have put together this sort of Pepe Sylvia-like assembly of evidence that suggests that the CIA, right, unhappy with Holt and his deeply unpopular approach, because obviously, the Vietnam issue in Australia was massive. There may be some listeners who are old enough to remember how much of an issue it was, right? Conscription, being sent off to fight in a war that we really had no skin in the game, all of that sort of stuff. And Holt was a supporter of the United States and President Johnson's campaigning in Vietnam. But there are those who put forward the idea that the CIA felt that he couldn't be trusted and felt that he was not the man for the job to lead Australia when it comes to, maintaining ongoing support for this American campaign in Southeast Asia. So I don't, as a historian, I don't particularly give this theory very much credence. I'll make that clear. I don't think this is what happened. But conspiracy theories like this are always interesting to discuss and look into. And some people put forward the idea that this was a CIA hit job, right? And that he was essentially assassinated by the CIA. I don't know how they managed to do this. I don't know how they managed to engineer a rip on Cheviot Beach on the day that he happened. But hey, listen, there is plenty of evidence out there about the CIA having done absolutely mental stuff in trying to knock off world leaders, right? Like the number of times they tried to assassinate Fidel Castro. This guy, I don't know if you heard of this. Fidel Castro, right? He also loved diving. He loved to go and collect conch shells, right? Like beautiful conch shells from the bottom of the sea in Cuba. The CIA tried to hatch a plot where they would poison, right? Put contact poison on conch shells that he would then dive down, pick up, and be poisoned by it, touch them and die as a result of that. He loved ice cream, so they tried to poison his ice cream. They tried to send him exploding cigars, right? Like the CIA have done some really, really out there stuff in trying to fulfill their policy objectives. So it's not
out of the realms of possibility that they could have organized something like this?
If it emerged that there were some strong evidence that this sort of thing had happened, it wouldn't be like, wow, that was out of character, I guess. That's the way that I'd put it. It wouldn't be completely out of left field. Having said that, there is not much concrete evidence that has ever emerged for this. And look, I don't mind talking about these conspiracy theories and sort of having a bit of a chuckle at them, but I sort of do feel I need to once again reiterate that there is not a lot of historical evidence for this. Another very popular conspiracy theory, this one is a little bit more ludicrous, was that he was picked up by a Chinese submarine. He did a deal
Defected?
he defected to the
Mhm.
CCP and went and lived the rest of his days, in bliss in China. Again, not a whole lot of evidence for that, but people do like to put these theories together. And even if there isn't necessarily a huge amount of evidence for them, again, they are pretty funny to explore. So,
Well, I guess we have to end his story with the joke that
oh,
is on him, with the dedication, because this is when people who don't live in Australia find out that this happened. I think it really paints a picture for them of what the Australian sense of humour is actually like.
yeah.
So please explain what we dedicated to the now presumed deceased Harold Holt.
So obviously there was a period of it was of national shock and mourning for the loss of a prime minister, and internationally too as well. This bloke was known across the world stage. I mean, he was our head of government. Of course, he was going to be his loss was going to be acknowledged internationally. And once all the memorials and the ceremonies and all that sort of stuff were done, a bunch of different things were named after him, as you'd expect. I think there's a suburb in Canberra named after him.
Holt, yep.
Yeah, right. There's even a US warship, right? I guess, in some way acknowledging his contribution to the ongoing US campaigning. There is the USS Harold Holt. But all of these things, right? That's what you'd expect. Suburbs, warships, whatever else. Very boring, right? Yeah, of course you're going to name that sort of stuff after him.
Mm-hmm.
In his own electorate in Melbourne, right, out in Glen Iris, there was a certain local government facility, shall we say, a recreational centre that was undergoing a refurbishment, a renovation at the time. And when it reopened, as a fitting tribute, a symbol, a way to honour our fallen Prime Minister, the local government in Glen Iris, they decided to rename this recreational centre after Harold Holt. But to be a bit more specific, when I say recreational centre, I can tell you that this recreational centre was, and still is, a swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
And it is still called the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre to this day. You can take the tram out to Glen Iris and you can go and have a swim in a pool named after an Australian Prime Minister who drowned.
Yep. And that says a lot about who we are as people, I believe. Okay, moving on from Harold Holt, can we talk about, there does seem to be an incredible amount of figures throughout history who have died on the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
The one that stands out for most of us that we probably already know of is obviously Elvis, who had some kind of massive coronary event. He was very overweight at the time whilst on the toilet. But there's a few in your book too, but there's one that stands out to me because the way my brain has imagined how this unfolded, and I'm not 100% sure if that's the way it actually unfolded, but I'd like to speak to you about it, is the death of Duke Godfrey IV of Lower Lorraine. So just give us an idea of who he is in history to start with.
So he was a duke. He was a loyal subject of the Holy Roman Empire, right? Which at the time, loosely what is today Germany, although a bit bigger than that, areas of France, Switzerland, northern Italy, Austria, Czech Republic, Poland. It was a very large and very complicated realm, right? I think the only word that actually makes sense in its name, Holy Roman, it was an empire. It wasn't particularly Roman and also wasn't very holy. Anyway, Duke Godfrey is a loyal vassal of the Holy Roman Empire. He was married to a very important woman in the history of the Middle Ages, Matilda of Tuscany. Very, very, very powerful woman. She ruled most of what is today northern Italy. Now, these two didn't get along. Their marriage was one of, obviously, in the way that, in the grand tradition of European nobles, they married for political reasons, not for love. And they ended up on the wrong side of a political divide between the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope, right? And it's thought that Duke Godfrey was such an inconvenience, right, for not just his wife, but the general supporters of the Pope everywhere, that he was assassinated, right, to just get him out of the way, to remove him from the picture so the people who supported the Pope could continue. There was a whole thing called the investiture controversy. It's very dry and boring, but essentially it came down to who was the real boss, who was in charge of things. Was it the Holy Roman Emperor? Was it the Pope? Now, Duke Godfrey, loyal vassal of the Holy Roman Emperor, he's a pain in the ass for anyone who supports the Pope, including his wife. So he gets knocked off. The full story behind exactly who and how his assassination was organised by and all that sort of stuff, that's never been full. It was a very cleanly and professionally done thing, I can tell you. But the thing that is notable about
cleanly
it,
is probably not the word. I would
it wasn't cleanly done at all.
in that at all.
It wasn't cleanly done at all. That's a very good point. From a procedural standpoint, rather than a practical one, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But Duke Godfrey was assassinated in... And look, you got to feel for the bloke, because when you go and have a sit on the toilet, mate, like, this is a time for peace and tranquility. It's a time to rest,
reflection,
recuperate, restore. Read the back of a shampoo bottle if you're in a literary mood. You know, it's a time... It's a place where you should feel safe, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, one day, Godfrey, he goes to the garderobe, right? And hiding in the... I don't know how to politely... Hiding in the area... the area into which this foul effluvium would be deposited, right? Mm-hmm. Was an assassin. Now, here is a man dedicated to his craft, right? They hire this assassin. Oh, we need you to knock off Duke Godfrey. Oh, okay, yeah, no worries, that's fine. Duke's my speciality. I'll give you a special rate for it. We do need you to do it. Well, oh, really? Okay, there are some conditions. There are some strings attached. No, this bloke, he crawled into essentially a cesspit, and he waited there for this bloke to arrive with, it won't surprise you to learn, a spear. He didn't want to get too close, right? He's doing it at some distance.
So he's holding a spear in a cesspit and waiting for the Duke to sit down.
He's waiting for the Duke to sit down. But the thing, like... there was a question that plagued me when I was researching this death, because I was never able to determine, how did you know it was the Duke?
Good question.
How did you know it was the Duke? Like, what, did he look up at this guy's bum winking at him and go, yep, I'd know that ass anywhere. That's a ducal ass if I've ever seen one. I have no idea.
I did not even think of that, but yes, good question.
How did this guy determine? Like, you don't want to knock. You don't want some poor servant to come in and look. Maybe it was one of those situations, like, like a CEO will have like a private toilet in the corner office on the top floor,
exclusive to Dukes. Yeah,
that's what I may be thinking. Right, that might explain it. It was his own private little garderobe. In any case, Godfrey goes in, sits down, gets ready to murder a brown snake, and this assassin struck from below. And I don't know how much grisly. I'm sure the listeners can imagine,
I mean, we are interested in knowing the trajectory of the spear, I guess.
Well, upwards, I can tell you. Upwards was the direction it took. And yes, this poor old bloke, Duke Godfrey, he was done away with, again, at a time when as you say, it should have been a peaceful and reflective time for him. But instead, he bled to death with perforated guts, the poor bloke, after having been killed on the toilet.
I would just like to finally ask you if there is a story in the book that you just love telling more than any of the others. Like, do you have a little favorite that you pull out at parties that is your go-to?
So there was this lawyer. His name was Clement Vallandigham, right? Had a bit of a checkered past. He was on the wrong side of the American Civil War, that sort of thing. But in his later years, he worked as a lawyer. And he was once, he was given the job to defend a client from a murder charge. Now, this client was accused of having shot another man in the guts in a barroom brawl, right? So this guy's, he's been arrested, he's been charged, he's going to be put in front of the judge, and he's going to be tried for murder. Vallandigham, he came out with a very novel criminal defense here that he was going to use to get his client off this charge. He said, no. My client didn't shoot anyone. What actually happened was the guy who died, right, the supposed murder victim, he actually shot himself in the guts. Now, how did he do this? A lot of raised eyebrows. You can imagine Clement, like Vallandigham, you can imagine him pitching this idea to the other defense lawyers, the defense team going, oh, okay, well, you better be going somewhere with this, Clement. Anyway, so Clement then, right, again, saying that this guy had shot himself in the guts, he took a pistol, he put it in his pocket, and he demonstrated to his colleagues how this guy could have put his hand in his pocket, tried to pull out a gun of his own to shoot his client, right? Because obviously the barroom brawl, things are getting heated. And what he did, he fumbled and stumbled with the gun, and it obviously went off while it was in his pocket and shot him in the guts. Now, this, actually on the face of it, is actually a pretty plausible thing that could have happened. But obviously, Vallandigham wanted to put it beyond a shadow of a doubt because, as I say, put a pistol in his pocket, fumbled around with it, trying to pull it out, didn't realize it was loaded, and shot himself in the guts while trying to do this, and he died of the wound. So,
I mean, proves his point though, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, we talked about that assassin being dedicated to his craft. How is this lawyer for being dedicated to his craft? He wanted to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guy could have shot himself in the guts, and he did so by shooting himself in the guts, right? He put his life on the line, and and this is the most unbelievable part of the story, right? The guy got off the murder charge. The defense team, they rock up at the court. They're like, oh well, yeah. So here's our theory. We tested it pretty thoroughly. We got the corpse to prove it, Your Honor. So Exhibit A guy shot himself in the guts, just like we're saying that this guy did. So what do you reckon? And this guy got off the murder charge. His lawyer defended him from beyond the grave.
To the death. Okay. Well, we can all hope for legal representation that dedicated, if in such time we would need it.
Yes.
Riley, thank you so much for sharing some of the stories from your book, History's Strangest Deaths. It is such a riotous read. I cannot recommend it enough, and I understand you're working on part 2 as we speak.
I haven't announced this anywhere else publicly, so yes, there is a second book coming. It's in the works. It's being worked on right now and should be out next year. If you like the first one, maybe you're like, I don't know, it's kind of funny sometimes, the book. My mum liked it.
Thank you so much, Riley. Appreciate you giving us your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much once again.